Hey, good morning. Glad you survived the weekend. If you're still here, you must have survived the weekend. And we're into our second week of hanging around home, social and physically distancing ourselves. And I think what people have realized is that it isn't so much social distancing, it is physical distancing because we do have all these amazing technological ways of connecting with each other, which are proving to be pretty useful. And, get out, get some exercise, but keep your distance. Anyway, what I'd like to do today is take a look at a screening test. One of the things that I am always talking to people about is doing some honest self-checking, like really checking and paying attention to where we are at with stuff, both uh, drug, alcohol use, mental health stuff. So today and over the next couple of days, I'm going to take you through this website, and I'll pull it up here so you can see it. Um, it used to be called checkyourdrinking.net, but now they must have changed companies. I'm not really sure what they did. The test is still called Check Your Drinking, but they also have a cannabis test, concussion test, smoking, gambling, and depression and anxiety. So over the next few days, we will go through those. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through this test and explain it as I go. And then I'll give you the website. And if you want to do a little experiment with yourself, you can take yourself through the test. And it gives you a really good readout on where your substance use or your gambling or your depression and anxiety is at. And particularly interesting is it gives you a comparison to where you are at in terms of everybody else that has taken this test. And so just for interest's sake, I'm going to uh, test myself as if I was a 17-year-old girl named Sally. And I'm a female and 17 years of age. I put that in already. And 125 pounds. And then it asks you, how much would a drink cost you? And I said, $2.25, which is about average if you're uh, buying cases of beer, cases of cooler, or a bottle of hard alcohol or a bottle of wine. Sorry. Okay, so it starts off with some questions. Oh, I forgot to check the box if I want to proceed. There we go. Okay, so first question is how often do you have a drink containing alcohol? So any alcohol, anytime. So Sally, and I was kind of based this on the thousands of kids that I've talked to about alcohol use. Sally likes to drink on the weekends, and so usually both nights on the weekend. So Friday and Saturday, she will have a few drinks with her friends. So we'll say 2 to 3 times a week. And that's an average. Sometimes it would be less, sometimes it would be more, but that's fair. So the second question, on a typical day when you do drink, how many drinks containing alcohol do you have? And so in order to answer that, you need to understand what a standard drink is. And if you look up, sorry, I don't know what's the matter with my voice today, but probably talking too much. Uh, uh, Standard drinks are regular sized beer, regular sized glass of wine, 3 ounce glass of stronger spirits like port or sherry, that kind of stuff, or uh, a shot glass full of regular alcohol, so 1.5 ounces of regular alcohol. So on a typical day, how many drinks containing alcohol do you have? So when Sally goes out, she usually takes a 6 pack of coolers. She gives 2 away to her friends, but she also has a shot or 2 of hard alcohol because somebody shared that with her. So we'll say 5 to 6 drinks. So that would be 4 coolers and 2 shots. And, oh, sorry, wrong button there. And so then, how often do you have 4 or more drinks on one occasion? So that's Sally's drinking pattern. When she does drink, she typically drinks that way. So that's 2 to 4 times a week. And then the fourth question is, how often during the last year have you found that you weren't able to stop drinking once you started? So that's a little bit confusing. If I was writing this test, I'd word it a little differently, but I didn't write the test, but I'll explain it. So what that means is that you drank more than you intended to, that you went too far. So maybe you started to feel too dizzy, or maybe you started to do stuff that was very out of character, or maybe you ended up throwing up, or maybe you ended up passing out, or drinking so much that you had some memory loss. So most of the time that doesn't happen to Sally. Her alcohol tolerance is kind of about where she drinks. So she gets drunk, but let's say once a month she goes overboard. Then the next question is, how often during the last year have you failed to do what was normally expected of you because of your drinking? So again, that's a little bit confusing. So that would include things like driving impaired, getting in a car with an impaired driver. If you're an adolescent, lying to your parents about why you need money. So, Mom, can I have $20 so I can go to a show? But actually what you're doing is pulling some cash together to buy alcohol so you can go drink with your friends. Or doing the sleepover thing. So can I go over to Hannah's house to have a sleepover? And really what you're doing is getting away from your parents' supervision so that you can drink. So how often during the last year have you failed to do what was normally expected of you because of your drinking? And so typically Sally isn't really honest about what she's doing. And she does have a bad habit of getting in a car with somebody who has been drinking. So let's say weekly. And then we'll go to the next page. And then this one says, how often during the last year have you needed a first drink in the morning to get yourself going after a heavy drinking session? So this test has been based on what's called an audit test, which is the alcohol use disorder inventory test. And that's a test for adults. With this test, when you're doing it with adolescents, again, I would take a look at this question because that's an unusual place for a teen to get. But if we change this question to how often are you drinking by yourself, how often are you having a drink by yourself, that's a question that creates a level of concern if that's true. So again, for Sally, let's say that maybe once a month she might have a couple of drinks by herself, maybe before she goes out. And pre-drinking is an example of that. How often during the last year have you had a feeling of guilt or remorse after drinking? So something happened that wasn't comfortable for you. Maybe you got in an argument with somebody who you normally wouldn't get an argument with, or maybe you said something to a friend that you felt bad about. So again, because monthly Sally's drinking a little bit too much, that tends to change our behavior a bit. And so we'll say or do something that isn't quite ourselves. Next one, how often during the last year have you been unable to remember what happened the night before because you were drinking? So what that's talking about is an alcohol-induced blackout. And blacking out isn't passing out. Blacking out is drinking and losing memory of what happened during that evening. So again, with Sally, that one time a month when she does drink too much, she will have some memory loss. She won't lose the whole evening, but there will be times where somebody said, hey, I don't believe that you did that last night. And she's like, what are you talking about? and they'll tell her or show her a picture of her doing something that she doesn't remember. So that happens maybe once a month with her. Have you or someone else been injured because of your drinking? And the options are no, yes, but not within the last year, and yes, during the last year. And a couple of weeks ago, Sally drank a little bit too much, fell down, had her phone in her hand, uh, uh, smashed her phone, but also hurt her wrist. So we'll say yes. And then the next question, has a relative, friend, doctor, or other healthcare professional ever shown concern about your drinking or suggested that you cut down? So Sally and I have had frequent conversations about this, and I've said to her pretty clearly that, yeah, you've been drinking too much. So we'll say yes during the last year. And then we'll go to the next question, or the next page. And this is, now this test is interesting because if your scores on those first 10 questions are pretty low, it won't take you to this page, but in this case it does because she's up over what's kind of normal. So what was your drinking like during a typical week in the last 12 months? We realize that this will only be a rough estimate, but please indicate the approximate number of drinks that you usually drank on each day of the week. So typically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sally wouldn't have been drinking because there's been a few days that there's been no school on Fridays. Sally will have gone out with her friends and had a few drinks on a Thursday night. Friday is usually her 5-drink. Saturday, kind of in that same 5 to 6 drink level. Sunday, rarely would be unusual for her to drink, so we'll leave that one at 0. And then what's the greatest number of drinks you've had on one day in the past 12 months? So let's say there has been one occasion in the last 12 months where Sally really kind of went over her usual limit and had 10 drinks, which would be her 6 coolers and 4 shots of hard alcohol. And then we'll click that. And then it brings up another series of questions. So within the last 12 months, was there ever a time that you felt your alcohol use had a harmful effect on your friendships or social life? So remember, we talked about the one time when she got in a fight with her friend, and that caused a little problem for a little while. Within the last 12 months, was there a time that your alcohol use had a harmful effect on your physical health? And because her alcohol use isn't ridiculous, we're going to say no to that. I mean, she'll wake up with a hangover once in a while, but generally she's not noticing that it is creating a big issue. Within the last 12 months, was there a time that you felt your alcohol use had a harmful effect on your outlook or on life, on her happiness? And Sally's been starting to notice that she's really looking forward to drinking, that she doesn't, Wednesday, Thursday, she's not feeling really herself and is starting really to look forward to being able to drink on the weekend. So that's indicating some depression. So we'll say yes to that. And then number 4, within the last 12 months, was there a time that you felt your alcohol use had a harmful effect on your home life or relationships? So this has caused trouble at home. She sometimes doesn't come home or, texts and says, hey, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to stay there. And her parents are concerned and starting to talk to her about that. So it's creating some tension at home. So we'll say yes. And number 5, within the last 12 months, was there a time that you felt your alcohol use had a harmful effect on your studies work or employment opportunities. And Sally hasn't really noticed that it's changed that much for her. She's still passing her classes and going to school, and she has a part-time job, and it hasn't, like, she hasn't missed work because of that, so we'll say no. Um, and within the last 12 months, was there a time that you felt your alcohol use had a harmful effect on your financial position? And again, Sally hasn't like been having to sell anything to buy alcohol, or doesn't really notice that it's been a big problem for her. So we'll say no to that. And then there's a click here to generate your report button. And so what this, like I said, what this test does is it analyzes uh, your alcohol use compared to other people in your demographic. So the average number of drinks you reported consuming per week was 14. How do you compare to females from your age in Canada? The highlighted slice of the pie shows, chart below shows where your drinking compares with other females in your age range. So Sally had 14 drinks per week. So she is in this, sorry, I'm screwing this up here. She's in the top 2% of people in her age group, top 2.3%, which means that all these dark blue areas are people that drink way less than Sally. They're non-drinkers. And that's something that's hard for people to get their head around. Most teens who drink will tell themselves, well, everybody does it. And that's true for the group that they're hanging around with, because we hang around with people who are doing the same thing that we're doing, because that normalizes what we are doing and makes us feel okay about it. So the 8 to 14 drink range is 2.3%. So 97.7% of people drink less than Sally does. And so if we go down a little bit further, in the last 12 months, she drank on 42.9% of the days. Her drink total for the year was 728 drinks. The greatest number of drinks that Sally had was 10. And so then we'll take a look at drinking patterns. So again, compared to other people in her age group, she's way higher than normal. She's these gold bars. So on Thursday, most people weren't drinking. It was like it's at 0.3 of a drink. When Sally did drink on Thursdays, she was in that 3 level. Fridays, the average is 0.8 of a drink. Sally's in that 5 drink range. Saturdays, average is 1 drink, and Sally's up to 6. And again, it's I didn't put these on my screen today, but those 4 questions: is what you're thinking true? Is it really true? How are you feeling or acting because of how you're thinking? And how would you feel or act if you thought differently? Like, if you think that your alcohol use is okay, that's going to make you feel comfortable with what you're doing. And the huge beauty and value of these tests is that it starts to get us to question where we are at with those things and those issues. So if we go down a little bit further, she spent $1,638 on alcohol. Like, that's a fair hunk of money. And let's go into 164 movies. I'm not sure how much they're paying for movie passes. I get in for seniors rate, so they're pretty cheap for me. And health and wellness, she consumed 467 calories every day that she drank. Based on total amount of drinking, enough alcohol to add roughly 21 pounds to your weight during the last year. So if you're not gaining weight, you're wearing it off somehow. but you're not eating to compensate for that. And about, well, it says 100 calories per drink, and 3,500 calories equals 1 extra pound of weight. That's 17 slices of pizza. To burn off those calories at 125 pounds, you take off an hour, 190 per hour of walking, 445 for running, and 545 for running, and swimming is 434 calories per hour. And so again, if we look at heavy drinking days, Sally was up over the limit. And so chances of negative consequences related to number of drinks per week, 27.3% increased risk of having a negative consequence if you're into that sort of 15 drink a week range. And her audit score, his audit is an alcohol use disorder inventory score. Sally's audit score was 27, and that puts her up into the alcohol dependent category. So if you had 0 tests, then you've got no problem. If your score is 1 to 7, that's starting to raise your risk. And remember, and I've talked about this a couple of times last week, drug and alcohol problems are pediatric onset. They tend to start in adolescence. And so if you do this test and you're an adolescent, and this is starting to show that you're drinking in a problem range, that's going to really increase your risks of having that problem later on. Hazardous is a score of 8 to 10, harmful, which means it's hurting you brain-wise and physically, is 11 to 19. And up over 20 puts you in alcohol dependent category. Now that story that I told about Sally isn't really that unusual. Like, I'm sure that, if you're watching this program and you're in that teenage category and you do use alcohol, as I was going through those drinking questions, it wouldn't surprise me if lots of you fit into that category, but understanding that if you do fit into that category, that's really significantly raising your risk of having an alcohol problem is actually a pretty big deal. And so, I've used this type of test for years when I'm working with groups of kids. And it's interesting, and we've had some really good comments from kids saying, I didn't realize that what I was doing was a problem. I'm going to change. And I've seen, lots and lots of kids actually do that just based on changing their thinking about what was the truth around what was going on with their alcohol use. And so it just goes down a little bit further. Burning alcohol, so it goes through what your body has to do that, and then it talks about sensible drinking guidelines, health effects of alcohol, and there's tons of information there. I'm not going to read it all because you'll stop listening. And then it goes through some ways of reducing your risk. And really, with adolescents, there's tons of research that indicates that this isn't good for adolescents at all. But again, if we look at the real world, not everybody's going to stop drinking because it's not good for them. But take a look at what kinds of things you can do to reduce those risks. Now, if you there was a spot here which I'll find again. somewhere. Final report for Sally. So it says you can send it to email or you can print it. I'd really be interested for anybody doing that test if you would send it to me, please. And and I'm not going to post them on the internet or do anything weird with them, but it kind of gives me a pretty good idea of generally where we're at with this stuff. And if you do send it and it does indicate a high score, that's that's an opportunity for me to say, hey, can I help you change this? Is there something we could work on to maybe significantly reduce your risk? So my email is info@drugclass.ca, and if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be awesome. So that's going to be our show for the day. So I will stop sharing that, and there I am back again. So again, hopefully you get something out of watching this. I'll post the link for this website underneath the show when it pops up today. And please check it out, like check yourself out, because that's a pretty useful thing to do. And I will see you tomorrow. Stay safe.